you can see a number 1 is still smaller than a 1/0. Circle. J. Worm. Kale. Flipping. Punching. What shape? What size? Can you use octopus hooks for anything other than octopuses?
That is a massive pig! Massive pig! Woo! We have definitely caught a giant! Oh my god, that hook was right in the corner of his mouth. Look at the size of this fish!
Circle. J. Worm. Kale. Flipping. Punching. What shape? What size? Can you use octopus hooks for anything other than octopuses? When it comes to the world of hooks, there's so many questions. So how do you know which hook is best for you? Don't worry guys, that's what I'm here for. I'm gonna break it all down. The whole wide world of hooks. Everything you need to know, from shape, size, what hook works where, and ultimately, what hook is the best hook for you. Today on Captain's Corner. That's right guys, when it comes to the wide world of hooks, things can get a little confusing. You wander down any one of your local tackle shops or big box stores and there's an entire row dedicated to just hooks. And unless you have years and years of experience, it can be pretty daunting on knowing what hook is best for whatever application you're looking for. Now I realize not everybody is on the same level when it comes to experience or knowledge of fishing. And some of you more advanced viewers might find this video a little bit easy. But I know from the questions you all send in, a lot of you have questions when it comes to hooks. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to break down everything you need to know about fishing hooks. What are the different sizes? What are the different shapes? And what are the different applications? All the information you need to know to arm yourself with more knowledge the next time you go fishing. There are literally dozens of styles of hooks, and they come in all different shapes and all different sizes. So to really get a true understanding of what makes a fishing hook, first let's go over the parts of a fishing hook. Up near the top, that little loop that you tie your line to, that's called the eye. Running down the back end of the hook, that's called the shank. Down where it bends, you guessed it, the bend. And that sharp bit right at the end here, that's the point. Just under the point, you'll usually find a barb. That barb is what helps hold that hook in the fish's mouth and not allow it to pull back out too easily. And one of the most important factors is the distance between the shank and the point of the hook. They call that the gap. This may seem pretty basic to a lot, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't know the proper terminology when they're talking about it. One of the biggest questions, and I think where people get most confused, is the sizing of hooks. There's basically only two formats to sizing hooks: numbers and aughts. Kind of a funny word, I know. I don't know who came up with it, if it was somebody named Aught. An aught is the line between two numbers. 1/0, 1/0. 4/0, 4/0. And numbers, that's fairly simple. 32 all the way to 1. And I think this is where it can get pretty confusing for a lot of folks out there. When you're talking about numbers and sizing of hooks, the higher the number, the smaller the hook. The lower the number, the bigger the hook. Number 1 being the biggest hook available in the number sizing. Now, aught sizing, that starts at 1 and goes all the way up. A 1/0 hook is smaller than a 20/0 hook. A 6/0 hook is bigger than a 3/0 hook. It took me a bit to get that too. The bigger the number, the smaller it is. The smaller the number, the bigger it is. Aughts are pretty simple. The lower the number, the smaller, and the bigger the number, the bigger. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. Looking at a chart like this, you can really get the idea. Number 8 hooks, all the way up to number 1 hooks. You can see how they grow. 4 being bigger than the 5, 3 being bigger than the 4, 2 being bigger than the 3, and 1 being the biggest out of all those. Putting them side by side in a chart like this, you can see a number 1 is still smaller than a 1/0. Number sizing ends at 1 and 0 sizing starts at 1. A number 1 is just smaller than a 1/0. 2/0 is bigger than 1/0, 3/0 is bigger than 2/0, 4/0 is bigger than 3/0, and so on and so forth all the way up. When you're standing in the store and you're looking at them all side by side, sometimes it's a little difficult to see the difference between a 1 and a 1/0. But now, hopefully after watching this video, you realize number sizing is smaller than 0 sizing. Another way to judge a size of a hook is the gauge. The gauge is actually very simple. It all has to do with the wire of the hook, the size of the wire. A smaller gauge will be a thinner wire. The bigger the gauge, the thicker the wire is going to be. The gauge of the hook is very important when it comes to the style of fishing you're going to be doing. A thinner gauged hook is much more suited to more finesse fishing. Lighter lines, lighter rods, and lighter cover and things you're going to be fishing in. Thinner gauge or lighter wire hooks penetrate a fish's mouth much easier than a heavier gauge hook. So you don't need the heavier gear to use a thinner gauged hook. In fact, if you use too heavy of a gear, heavy braided line, or a really stiff rod, chances are you're going to bend that hook out when you make that hook set. And it weighs a lot less. With bigger gear like stiffer rods or heavier line, it's pretty hard to cast little light wired hooks. A bigger gauge or thicker wired hook requires more force on a hook set to get that thicker wire to penetrate through the fish's mouth. It's going to be much better suited for bigger gear. Bigger gauge hooks or thicker wire, heavier wire hooks are obviously much better when it comes to fishing heavy cover. When you're fishing in a lot of grass, a lot of weeds, sticks, logs, even rocks, a thicker wired hook isn't going to bend as much when you do get hooked up, making it stronger and easier to pull out of all that heavy cover. When I'm trying to guess the gauge of a hook, I'm going by those same rules. If I got lighter conditions that I'm fishing with lighter line, and I'm fishing with lighter gear, I'm going to fish with a lighter wire or a smaller gauge. If I'm fishing in heavier cover, if I'm fishing with heavier gear, and I'm fishing with heavier line, I need a heavier or thicker gauge hook. Pretty simple when you think about it like that. Think of those 3 conditions. How heavy or thick is the cover you're fishing, how heavy or thick is the line you're going to be using, and how heavy or strong is the gear you're using. Judging the gauge of your hook to those 3 factors will really help you decide what thickness or gauge hook you need. Now let's go over a couple of the styles of hooks. First, and the most common style of hook you're going to find is your standard J hook. It's pretty easy to see how a J hook got its name. A straight, long shank, bending around in the shape of a J. J hooks come in all different sizes, but the shape stays the same no matter what size it is. J hooks make fantastic hooks for just about any application. You can do a lot of artificials with J hooks, and they work very well for live bait and other bait situations. An important thing to notice on a J hook is the point of the hook. It's straight, just like the shank of the hook. A very common J hook that you see is a hook like this. It's a flipping hook or a punching hook. It has a little bait keeper on it. And flipping hooks and punching hooks are made to hold soft plastics while you flip them into heavy cover. Flipping hooks and punching hooks have a much thicker gauge to them. They're a much stronger hook. Heavier wire for heavier cover. Now here's another J hook that's got a medium thickness when it comes to the wire and the gauge. That little keeper right there holds your soft plastic in place. And being a thinner gauge or a thinner wired hook, this one's going to do better on lighter soft plastics and thinner soft plastics, or anything that's got a smaller profile. The next style of hook is going to be the circle hook. Now you can clearly see where circle hooks get their name. They're shaped much more like a circle. The shape of the hook is rounded and bent, But the most important feature of a circle hook is the point of the hook. The point of a circle hook is bent almost to a 90-degree angle, pointing directly in to the shank of the hook. The real advantage to circle hooks is fishing with bait or live bait. The design of a circle hook is designed so you don't need to set the hook. As pressure is applied by reeling your line in, the point of the hook stabs in and rotates around, naturally hooking the fish almost every time right in the corner of the fish's mouth. Because of the shorter shank of a circle hook and the design of them, they're much safer hooks when you're talking about fishing with bait. There's much less of a chance of the fish swallowing this hook and getting gut hooked. Circle hooks are also very strong. It's very hard to bend out a circle hook. To remove a circle hook from a fish's mouth, you have to twist it back around the other way. It makes it very hard for the fish to spit a circle hook. Once they're hooked, they're stuck, and it's very hard for them to get off of that hook. Circle hooks are generally the preferred hook for bait fishermen because of their strength, because of the ease of hooking, because of the safe way it treats the fish. Every manufacturer has their own style of circle hooks, but the key features are the roundness of the shank and the 90-degree bend in the point of the hook. No doubt, circle hooks are one of the most common and most popular hooks for bait. Choosing the size of your circle hook has a lot to do with the size of your bait that you're using and the size of the mouth of the fish you're fishing for. The next style of hook I want to talk about is an octopus hook. And no, don't let the name fool you. These are not for catching octopus. I don't really know where the name came from. I'm sure you can Google it and find out. But octopus hooks are a great versatile hook. They're almost a blend between a circle hook and a J hook. Traditionally, octopus hooks have a shorter shank on them. The eye of the hook is bent out at a 45 degree, but the point is straight like a J hook. Octopus hooks make great bait hooks, but they also make great artificial hooks, especially when you're talking about presentations that are a little more finesse, like a drop shot or a wacky rig. Octopus hooks provide a small hook with a lot of strength. Even a smaller or thinner wired octopus hook is going to have a lot of strength. It's harder to bend that small hook than a long straight shanked hook would, or a traditional J hook. Even a smaller octopus hook can still handle a much larger fish. That makes octopus hooks a great choice for both bait and artificial lures. And next, the Kale Hook. A Kale Hook is primarily a live bait hook. It is a unique hook that excels very well when using live bait. The shape and the design holds on to that live bait very, very well, and also has a very good way of hooking thicker lipped and bigger mouthed fish. When you're using big live bait, Kale hooks can be one of the best hooks on the market. A Kale hook starts with a straight shank going straight down from the eye and then arcing before it comes to the bend, leading to a straight point. Kale hooks also have what's known as an offset point. It bends off to one side. This offset hook point really helps when it comes to hook sets and also holding on to that squirming, swimming live bait. Kale hooks come in a large variety of sizes, and you want to adjust the size of your Kale hook to the size of the live bait you're using. Whether you're hooking a Kale hook through the nose, through the back, or even near the tail of your live bait, the wide gap in the shank and the bend of the hook creates a nice cozy pocket to hold tight to your live bait. Kale hooks generally have a thinner gauge wire to them as well, which makes them a lot lighter and a lot easier for any live bait to be able to swim around freely, unhindered by the weight of a hook. You can get away with a bigger hook being lighter using a Kale hook. It'll penetrate deeper inside of the mouth, more into the cheek of the fish, and being a thinner wire and a thinner gauge, it penetrates through the harder bone a lot easier than a thicker gauge of a circle hook. Kale hooks make an excellent option for live bait, especially when you're talking about larger fish with larger mouth and thicker lips. They also make great live bait hooks when you're talking about predatory fish with teeth. There is a lot more shank to that hook. Rather than a circle hook that has a short shank and can result in toothy critters biting at the line rather than onto the shank of the hook. No matter how you break it down, Kale hooks are a true live bait hook. Next is the worm hook. The worm hook did not get its name from using bait like earthworms. They got their name from soft plastics like rubber worms. And as you can see here, there's actually two styles of worm hooks. Worm hooks are primarily used by freshwater fishermen, and they are almost exclusively used for soft plastics. Any kind of soft plastic artificial lure is what these hooks were made for. The most notable feature of any worm hook is the bend right below the eye. That's called the keeper. By creating that bend, it holds on to your soft plastic and helps to stop that soft plastic from sliding down the hook and balling up when you're retrieving it. Hooks like this are most commonly used on certain rigging styles of soft plastics like Texas rigs or Carolina rigs. It makes a fantastic hook for soft plastics because it does hold on to them better, but it also makes it so you can rig your soft plastics weedless. This style of worm hook is most often known as either a straight shank or a round bend worm hook. The straight shanked style of this worm hook makes it suited much better for your smaller or thinner profiled soft plastics. The other version of worm hooks has a very noticeable bend or arc in the shank of that hook. That creates a bigger gap between the point of the hook and the shank of the hook. This style of hook is generally known as a wide gap or even EWG extra wide gap worm hooks. This style of worm hook is going to be much better suited to your heavier body, thicker bodied soft plastics. Having that extra bend and that bigger gap allows more hook to come through the whole body of that soft plastic to get much better hook sets and hold on to the fish a lot better. Deciding which style of worm hook is best for you is going to depend entirely on what plastics you're using them on. Worm hooks, whether straight shanked or extra wide gap, excel when it comes to artificial soft plastic lures. And finally, the last hook we're going to talk about is known as a swimbait hook. Swimbait hooks are designed primarily for swimbaits, soft plastic paddle tail swimbaits. They can really be used for almost any soft plastic application. They do a very good job of balancing out soft plastics to keep them running straight up and down. They generally will have a screw lock keeper that twists into the nose end of your soft plastic, and they create a very weedless presentation. Noticeable characteristics of swimbait hooks: the eye of the hook is in line with the shank of the hook. Right behind the eye is a bend to the hook before it reaches the shank. Then a fairly straight, long shank, leading to a wide gap to be able to fit the heavier, thicker bodies of swimbaits and other soft plastic lures. Very often you will see a weight somewhere on the shank of that hook. It acts as a keel, keeping that bait straight up and down so it doesn't twist from side to side or even roll over. Hanging from the eye of the hook is a screw. That screw will screw directly into the nose of the bait, holding it very, very firm and allowing it to swing on the hook. When a fish bites, the plastic pushes down and the big wide gap hook sticks out to grab firmly into that fish's mouth. Swimbait hooks are generally a thicker gauge and a thicker wire altogether. They're a heavy hook and they're best suited for fishing with heavy gear. There is a variety of soft plastics you can fish on these, and of course, paddle tail swimbaits work famously well on them. Swimbait hooks make a great addition to any artificial soft plastic fisherman's arsenal. So there you have it. With so many options and varieties of hooks out there, it's no wonder a lot of us find it pretty confusing. But hopefully now you have a much better understanding on the sizes of hooks, the shapes of hooks, and primarily what each hook is used for. And hopefully next time you go shopping for some new fishing hooks, you're armed with a little bit more knowledge on what you're actually looking at in the store. Well guys, I really hope this helped you, and I hope you learned a little something. If you did, make sure you smash the heck out of that like button and leave a comment on anything else you'd like to see us film. We'll do our very best to make a video out of each and every one of those. But most importantly, subscribe to the channel and make sure you stay subscribed, because there's plenty more coming right here on KastKing.